Will the real Donald Trump please stand up? I took that line from an old game show back in the 50s called To Tell the Truth, where three people would line up. One guy was sworn to tell the truth, and the other two people were imitating him. They were caricatures, or straw men, if you will. But just to make things a little bit more clear, what is a straw man, and what is a caricature, and what is this image that the media has ginned up about Donald Trump versus who he might really be? Straw man, an intentionally misrepresented proposition that is set up because it's easier to defeat that than an opponent's real argument, or a person regarded as having no substance or integrity. Scarecrow. Caricature, a person, description, or imitation of a person or thing in which certain striking characteristics are exaggerated in order to create a comic or grotesque effect, or make or give a comically or grotesquely exaggerated representation of someone or something. I really believe that most of the country does not know who the president is. They believe the caricature or the straw man that's been developed by the media. A lot of that came from the campaign, when a lot of things are said and done that don't really represent either candidate. I really don't think Hillary Clinton is as mean-spirited as the conservatives made her out to be. I don't think she's as crooked as, the lock her up meme seems to be. And then Donald Trump is not as mean or as racist or as misogynist as the media wants to make him out to be. So who is this real Donald Trump? Well, if Donald Trump is really evil, the way he's portrayed by many of the liberal commentators and believed by many of the liberal voters, well, then we'd have to believe that he's maybe Dr. Evil. And if he has a Dr. Evil, maybe he has a mini-me.
I'm Wes Tenheimer. I'm the co-chair for Jefferson County for the Donald Trump campaign.
How old are you?
I'm 12 and a half.
That's quite young to be co-chair of Donald Trump's campaign in this critical county, isn't it?
Not really. I know what I'm doing. I've been in politics since I was very young, and the people from the Trump campaign, they trust me.
Where are you headed politically?
Well, I'm headed politically to run for the presidency in 2040. That'll be my first eligible year, so I'm ambitious. I had Kyle Clark ask me from 9 News if do you think that's overly, what was the word he used? Overly...
presumptuous?
Yeah, something like that. And I said, no, I really don't.
Some people have said he can't be trusted because he's a flip-flopper. Well, how about this little Oprah Winfrey interview from 25 years ago, and you asked me if it sounds like the same guy or a different guy?
You took out a full-page ad in major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this country, because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah. Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings.
Sounds like the same guy to me, but maybe he has changed. So what are his talents? He seems to be a successful businessman. He don't go from $1 million loan up to $10 billion or $5 billion, depending on who you talk to, without being smart, without being talented. So is that his only talent? Perhaps.
Here to sing the theme from Green Acres, please welcome Donald Trump and Will and Grace's Karen Walker.
Is the place to be. Farm living is the life for me. Land spreading out so far and wide. Keep Manhattan, just give me that countryside.
New York is where I'd rather stay.
wife.
Goodbye, city life.
Green Acres, we are there.
Well, singing is certainly not one of his talents, but do people respect him? Do they appreciate that we have a new president? Well, I think the Russians do.
I would like to congratulate all Americans who achieved the victory of Donald Trump. Today is a great celebration in America. Everybody drinks champagne. To your health, Donald Trump.
So what about the Russians? What about the media? Well, I think Donald Trump has been caricaturized into a caricature and a straw man by the media. Because the media, you know, your television and radio and newspaper and print and celebrities and shows and, you know, all that stuff, including YouTube and Instagram and a few other places, they are all possible avenues of propaganda. And propaganda is important to a government. Just consider the way propaganda has been used, or the necessity of propaganda.
A good government can no more exist without propaganda than good propaganda without a good government.
During the campaign, there was a lot of people that you would have thought would have gotten behind the Republican candidate that didn't. You had the never-Trumpers and the ultra-conservatives, and people were surprised that the evangelicals and the fundamentalists actually got behind Donald Trump. Well, maybe that shouldn't be too surprising. Although the critics had a few things to say about Donald Trump, such as he's a Christian, he doesn't even know how to pronounce the books of the Bible. He doesn't seem to understand much about it at all. He probably doesn't know the difference between a catechism and a baptism. So what makes him appeal to the Christians? He's a strong leader, that's what. Kind of authoritarian? Yeah. That's why the libertarians don't care much for him. Authoritarian, though, it does fit into Christianity because the Christians believe the Word of God is the absolute authority on life and social matters and moral matters. That's authoritarian. And in many denominations, the pastor or the preacher or the priest is authoritarian in running his congregation. What he says goes. So authoritarian does actually appeal to evangelicals, fundamentalists, and even a lot of Roman Catholics. How about the issue of abortion? Is he pro-life? Is he pro-choice? Well, we have plenty of documentation to know that he was pro-choice in the past. But now he's pro-life, and he said he had an epiphany when he saw, one of those sonograms, and some personal friends of his, he followed them through the whole pregnancy thing. He's had a number of children of his own, and it brought him around to the concept of pro-life. I mean, in all fair disclosure, I spent 50 years in a denomination that believed in pro-choice because they didn't think the child was actually human until it took its first breath. And the the Hebrew concept of nefesh kai, living soul, as it's translated in the Old Testament, means breath life, to take a breath. So I changed my views. Why? Because I came to the conclusion that the ancient Hebrews considered all life precious and all life a gift of God. So it isn't just breathing that makes you alive, it's just being alive. That's all. So I became pro-life. Yeah, people can change. Another problem people have with Donald Trump is that he seems to be rather thin-skinned. It doesn't take much to set him off and get a counterpunch out of Trump, such as the McDonald's criticism of him in their official Twitter account. And he responds back like within an hour with a criticism back. And as nearly as anybody can figure out, the director of communications from McDonald's is a Hillary supporter, Hillary donor, Democrat donor, and people are beginning to suspect that he's the one that did it. But no, he doesn't represent the McDonald's Corporation, and McDonald's happens to be Donald Trump's favorite restaurant. He loves McDonald's and fries and the Big Mac, all that kind of stuff. So maybe he is thin-skinned, and maybe that's okay, because we've been run over a little too much by a country anyway, by other countries taking advantage of us, so maybe that's not so bad. A lot of conservatives have complained that Donald Trump in the past was a liberal. Well, liberal may be more in a classical sense than the neoliberals we have today, because the neoliberals we have today are more like fascists than classical liberals. Libertarians are more like the classical liberal. But does all of that matter? Maybe not at all. After all, Donald Trump might be a successful businessman and a kindly grandfather and a good family man who just loves the country and in his own peculiar way wants to make it better. Maybe that's all there is to Donald Trump. Just an old guy who wants to make our country better for all Americans because it's blessed him so much to be able to acquire wealth in his own way. Maybe that's all there is to Donald Trump. He's just a nice old grandfather who's a patriot.